You know, right now, as you're sitting there, you are currently carrying around roughly 38 trillion invisible passengers.
Which is just a massive number to even try to comprehend.
Right. It's wild. Like, to put that into perspective, those microbial cells actually outnumber your own human cells. So you are quite literally more microbe than human.
You really are. And once you realize that, a very relatable, incredibly frustrating modern experience starts to make a lot more sense.
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone knows the exact scenario we're talking about. You're doing absolutely everything right, you know? You're eating carefully, you're watching your portions, you're getting your steps in, and yet you step on the scale and it's stubbornly refuses to budge.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you've got that one friend who just seemed to eat freely, never counts a single calorie, and somehow never gains an ounce.
It is so maddening. Welcome to the Deep Dive, by the way. I'm your host, and today we're tackling exactly why that happens. Because for decades, the standard advice has basically been a subtle form of gaslighting.
It really has. I mean, the message from the fitness world has always just been, try harder, eat less, burn more.
Yeah, like if you aren't losing weight, you must be doing the math wrong or you just lack discipline. It's framed entirely as a failure of willpower.
Exactly. But today, we're diving deep into the gut microbiome, and the science is pointing to something, well, something pretty revolutionary. Weight management is fundamentally not just a simple equation of calories in, calories out.
It's so much more complex than that. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore how these 38 trillion microbes actively extract calories from your food, how they literally hijack your hunger hormones, and most importantly, how you can actively reshape this entire ecosystem.
Right, we're going to look really closely at the precise biological mechanisms here. We need to understand how bacteria dictate where you store fat and the chemical signals they use to tell your brain to feel hungry or full.
But before we get into the heavy science, I want to drop a bit of a teaser for you listening. Later on, we're going to reveal why trying to, eat clean too quickly by dramatically restricting your diet overnight might actually be the absolute worst thing you can do for your metabolism.
It sounds totally counterintuitive, right? Considering everything we've been taught about dieting.
Totally backwards. But the biology backs it up.
It does. To understand why those restrictive crash diets almost always fail, we have to look closely at those invisible workers processing the food you eat.
Okay, let's unpack this. The workers themselves. Because everyone has a different crew down there, right? We are all operating with the same baseline.
Not at all. Your gut microbiome is as unique as a fingerprint. I mean, it is shaped by everything from how you were born like, whether vaginally or via C-section, to the specific diet you ate as a toddler.
Wow, even that far back.
Oh, yeah. And the rounds of antibiotics you've taken over your lifetime, even the physical environments you've lived in. But when researchers look specifically at human weight, they focus heavily on two key bacterial players.
Okay, what are they?
Firmicutes and bacteroidetes.
Firmicutes and bacteroidetes. So what exactly are they doing differently when it comes to, processing our food?
Well, studies indicate that in people who carry excess weight, the ratio of firmicutes to bacteroidetes tends to be much higher. And firmicutes are they're incredibly efficient at breaking down dietary fiber and complex carbohydrates into short-chain fatty acids.
Which sounds good, but
Right, but your body then absorbs those as additional energy.
additional energy, meaning extra calories.
Exactly.
So let me see if I can visualize this. It's like, okay, think of two identical cars, right? You put the exact same gallon of gas in the tank of both cars, but they get wildly different mileage depending on the engine.
That's a great way to put it.
Like if your gut is staffed heavily by firmicutes, you've essentially got the super engine that refuses to let a single drop go to waste. They extract every possible ounce of usable material and immediately pack it away into the belly fat storage warehouse, just in case there's a famine tomorrow.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Yeah.
The firmicutes are hoarding inventory. They literally extract measurably more calories from the exact same bite of food than a different bacterial workforce would.
Wait, I really have to push back on this a little bit. Are you telling me that the universally accepted rule of a calorie is just biologically flawed? I mean, 100 calories of almonds is always 100 calories, isn't it?
It is fundamentally flawed when you view it through the lens of the microbiome. I know it's hard to accept, but the calorie count on a nutrition label is just a measure of the potential energy in the food before it enters your body.
Right.
It does not account for the biological efficiency of the organism digesting it. And We actually have absolute proof of this from a landmark study.
Oh, I love a good causal proof. Walk me through exactly how they proved it.
So this was conducted at the Washington University School of Medicine, and it's fascinating. They used germ-free mice.
Like
Yeah,
completely sterile.
exactly. These are animals raised in highly sterile, isolated environments, so they develop absolutely zero gut bacteria of their own. They're a complete blank slate.
Okay, wow. So what did they do with them?
The researchers took gut bacteria from obese human donors and transplanted them into one group of these germ-free mice. Then they took gut bacteria from lean human donors and transplanted them into a second group.
So you have two groups of mice, genetically identical, living in the exact same environment, and the literally only difference is the human bacteria they've just been given.
Yes. And then they fed both groups of mice the exact same diet. I mean, they meticulously measured the food to ensure the caloric intake was identical.
Let me guess, the results were completely different.
Completely. Over time, the mice that received the bacteria from the obese human donors gained significantly more fat than the mice that received the bacteria from the lean donors.
That is staggering. I mean, they ate the exact same diet, calorie for calorie.
Calorie for calorie. The only variable was the microbial workforce processing the food. This study was just a massive watershed moment in biology
I bet.
because it proved definitively that your gut ecosystem plays a direct physical role in how much fat your body stores. It's causation, not just correlation.
So it's not just about extracting extra calories then. The thing that really caught my attention in the research is that these microbes are basically dictating our human behavior too. They're actually altering our cravings.
Yeah, this is where we move from simple calorie extraction to outright hormone hijacking.
Hormone hijacking, that sounds intense.
It is. The microbes in your gut communicate directly with your brain through a massive network of nerves and biochemical signals. We call this the gut-brain axis.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that, honestly. Like, how can a microscopic, single-celled organism living down in my large intestine tell my highly evolved, conscious human brain that I desperately need to eat, like, a glazed donut at 10 p.m.? That sounds like science fiction.
It totally sounds like sci-fi, but the mechanism is purely biochemical. These bacteria produce specific signaling molecules that enter your bloodstream and travel straight to your brain.
And what do they do once they get there?
They directly control two crucial human hormones. First is ghrelin, which is your body's primary driver for hunger. And second is leptin, which is the signal that tells your brain you are completely full and should stop eating.
Oh, wow. Which perfectly explains why you might eat a heavy, supposedly filling meal, and then 2 hours later you are just ravenously hungry again.
Exactly.
Your conscious brain thinks, hey, we just ate, we should be full, but your bacteria are basically pulling the fire alarm, flooding your system with ghrelin, screaming, we're starving down here, send sugar.
That's precisely it. And what's fascinating here is how deep this biochemical communication goes, especially when we look at the inflammatory pathways.
Inflammation is such a buzzword right now. How does that connect?
Well, there's extensive research from the Institut National de la Recherche Agronomique, or INRA, in France. They study a process called metabolic endotoxemia.
Metabolic endotoxemia. Okay, that sounds incredibly serious. What is actually happening in the body there?
So, certain unbalanced bacterial populations, usually the opportunistic ones that thrive on highly processed diets, they naturally shed debris from their cell walls.
Just like dead cell parts.
Yeah, exactly. And these fragments are highly inflammatory molecules called lipopolysaccharides.
Okay, lipopolysaccharides.
Now, normally, these fragments should stay safely contained inside your digestive tract. But if your gut lining is disrupted, the tight junctions between your intestinal cells literally open up.
Ah, is this what people colloquially call leaky gut?
Yes, exactly. So these inflammatory lipopolysaccharides pass right through the physical barrier of the gut wall and flood straight into your bloodstream.
And once bacterial debris is just floating around in the bloodstream, the human immune system must go absolutely crazy.
Oh, it triggers massive systemic alarms. The immune system launches a low-grade chronic inflammatory response throughout the entire body.
And how does that tie back into weight gain?
Here is the crucial connection. This specific type of inflammation directly interferes with your body's insulin receptors. When your cells are inflamed, they become deaf to insulin.
Meaning your blood sugar stays high.
Right. Your blood sugar stays chronically high, and your body's evolutionary default response to high blood sugar is to aggressively store that excess energy as fat.
Specifically, visceral abdominal belly fat, right?
Yes, exactly.
So that stubborn belly fat that people spend years doing crunches to get rid of, It might actually be driven by a microscopic bacterial leak causing an immune response, rather than, say, just eating too many carbs.
Absolutely. And the Karolinska Institute in Sweden actually expanded on this. They found that these specific bacteria even alter your bile acid metabolism.
Wait, bile, like what the liver makes.
Yes, bile is what your liver produces to break down dietary fats. So the microbial communities in your gut are literally changing the chemical process of how you absorb the fats you eat on a cellular level.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. It's the extreme personalization of all this. There was a study from the journal Cell that looked at blood sugar responses to specific foods, right?
Oh, the personalized glycemic response study.
Uh,
Yeah, that one completely disrupted the whole field of nutrition.
because for decades, we've relied on the glycemic index to tell us how a food will spike our blood sugar. Like a piece of white bread is supposed to cause a massive spike, and a bowl of lentils is supposed to cause a tiny, slow rise.
Right, that was the gold standard rule.
But this Cell study showed that personalized microbiome profiles predict blood sugar responses far better than the standardized glycemic index ever could.
Which means the traditional glycemic index is essentially an illusion, or at least an oversimplified average that just doesn't apply to the individual.
Right. So two people can sit down, eat the exact same piece of white bread, and have entirely different biological reactions. One person's glucose might shoot through the roof, triggering that massive insulin release and storing fat, while the other person's blood sugar barely registers a blip. All because the microbial fingerprints processing that bread are completely different.
Exactly. And we see the immense population-level scale of this in the MetaHIT study. This was a massive European research project involving over 1,000 participants.
And what did they find?
They found a very clear, undeniable equation. A low bacterial gene count, meaning a low diversity of species in the gut, directly equates to metabolic disruption.
So less diversity equals more problems.
Precisely. People with low diversity had higher body fat, more severe insulin resistance, and higher markers of chronic inflammation. It proved that microbial diversity isn't just a vague wellness buzzword. It is a highly measurable, critical metabolic asset.
Okay, so if diversity is the asset, and a lack of diversity is what's causing the leaky gut inflammation, the insulin resistance, and the hyper-efficient calorie hoarding, human instinct is to immediately go on a crash diet.
Right, of course.
We look in the mirror, think, my metabolism is completely broken, and decide we need to cut carbs, cut sugar, and restrict our calories to a bare minimum. But earlier, I teased that this instinct is the absolute worst thing you can do.
It really is. When people try to eat clean too quickly, by dramatically restricting their diet and eliminating whole food groups, they're doing immense, sudden damage to their internal ecosystem.
How so?
Think about the factory floor analogy you used earlier. Diversity depends on keeping a wide variety of specialized workers fed and happy. When you suddenly eliminate their food source, you literally starve massive populations of beneficial bacteria to death.
Wow, you're orchestrating mass layoffs for your microbial workforce.
It's exactly what you're doing. And a microbiome with radically lowered diversity has zero metabolic resilience. This sudden restriction causes severe biochemical instability. It triggers massive panic spikes in your hunger hormones because the starving bacteria are flooding the gut-brain axis with distress signals.
So the diet inevitably fails, not because you lack the mental fortitude or willpower, but because you've essentially provoked a bacterial rebellion inside your own stomach.
Yes, the biology makes the cravings impossible to ignore. But the silver lining here is the incredible plasticity of the gut. It isn't a fixed genetic trait like your eye color or your height.
Which means we can actively fix it.
Highly plastic. Research from the Sonnenberg lab at Stanford University shows that your gut microbiome can actually begin to physically shift its composition and alter its genetic expression in just 24 to 48 hours after a deliberate dietary change.
Just a day or two. That is amazing. So the fix isn't about restriction at all. It's about addition. What do we actually need to add to the factory floor to build this diversity back up?
It comes down to two main categories: adding the workers and providing the optimal fuel. First, you add live bacteria. These are your fermented foods: natural yogurt, kefir, kimchi, unpasteurized sauerkraut, miso.
So we hire more diverse workers by eating those.
Right. Introducing these consistently adds fresh, diverse microbial species to the ecosystem.
Got it. And then we have to make sure they don't starve.
Exactly. Their absolute preferred fuel is prebiotic fiber. But we are talking about highly specific types of fiber that survive the stomach acid and make it all the way to the large intestine.
Like what?
Legumes are absolute powerhouses here. Lentils, chickpeas, black beans, also whole intact grains like oats and barley. And you need diverse, brightly colored vegetables because the vibrant colors indicate the presence of polyphenols.
Why do polyphenols matter so much? I hear that word a lot.
Polyphenols are complex plant compounds that human cells can't actually digest. But certain highly beneficial strains of bacteria thrive exclusively on them. So by eating a wide spectrum of colors, you are feeding a wide spectrum of specialized bacteria.
Oh, that makes sense. And the research also heavily highlighted nuts and seeds, particularly walnuts and flax seeds, because they provide the raw materials for a very specific job, maintaining the integrity of the gut lining, right? We
Mhm.
want to prevent that leaky gut inflammation we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They supply the essential fatty acids required to keep the mucosal barrier thick and the cellular tight junctions closed, ensuring those inflammatory lipopolysaccharides stay trapped inside the gut where they belong.
To bring this out of the abstract science and into real life, there were two distinct stories in our sources that brilliantly illustrate this shift from restriction to addition. There was Priya, who is 42, and Daniel, who is 29.
Yeah, their physiological responses are textbook examples of applying this microbiome science.
Supriya had been dealing with stubborn abdominal weight for years. She was doing the classic restriction, avoiding all junk food, meticulously weighing her portions, but she was exhausted and constantly hungry.
Very familiar cycle.
Every single night, she battled these relentless, overwhelming cravings for sugar. She was entirely trapped in that hormone hijacking cycle where her bacteria were screaming for quick energy.
And her historical approach to a weight plateau was always to restrict her calories even further, which predictably only made her more exhausted and her cravings more intense.
Exactly. But then she fundamentally flipped the script. Instead of cutting things out, she added a scoop of fermented yogurt to her breakfast. She started incorporating a half cup of lentils into her lunches. She made a deliberate point to buy 3 different brightly colored vegetables every week instead of just steaming the same standard broccoli every night.
And by increasing her dietary diversity, she rapidly increased her bacterial diversity. She gave her ecosystem the raw materials to stabilize.
And then Daniel's situation was a bit different, but equally telling. He's 29, a software developer, sitting at a desk all day, relying heavily on ultra-processed delivery food.
Not great for the gut.
No. So he decided to lose weight by trying an extreme zero-carb diet. Within a week, he felt terrible. Severe mental fog, completely exhausted, unable to focus on his code.
Right, because his baseline microbiome was already severely depleted from years of a low-fiber diet and likely previous rounds of antibiotics. When he went zero-carb, he starved whatever beneficial bacteria he had left.
But when Daniel started introducing complex fiber, fermented foods, and cooking with a wider variety of plants, that constant low-grade hunger he felt all day just naturally faded away.
Which is the goal.
The fascinating part is that both Priya and Daniel naturally lost weight, not by starving themselves, but because their satiety hormones, that leptin signal, finally recalibrated.
They fed their microbial workforce the correct fuel, and the workforce stopped flooding their brains with panic signals for quick energy. It's that simple.
So what we put on our plate is obviously the primary lever we can pull. But food is only half the ecosystem. How we actually navigate our daily lives physically changes the terrain our bacteria live in, doesn't it?
Oh, immensely. We have to look at what chemically damages the terrain and what heals it. On the disruption side, the major culprits go far beyond just junk food. We're looking specifically at emulsifiers in ultra-processed foods.
Emulsifiers, the chemical additives that make packaged food completely shelf-stable and give things like ice cream or store-bought bread that incredibly smooth texture. How are they hurting the gut?
Emulsifiers essentially act like soap. In a factory, soap is great for cutting through grease. But in your gut, studies point to emulsifiers actively washing away and destroying the thick, protective mucus layer that coats your intestinal walls.
Ouch.
Yeah, they literally strip away the physical home where your beneficial bacteria live, leaving the gut lining exposed and vulnerable to inflammation.
And then there is the paradox of artificial sweeteners. Because people consume diet sodas specifically to lower their calories, help with blood sugar, and lose weight.
Yet research suggests artificial sweeteners are profoundly disruptive. They might have 0 human calories, but they biochemically alter the metabolic pathways of certain bacteria, leading to dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in the gut.
Oh, wow.
And this altered microbiome composition negatively affects how your body regulates blood sugar when you do eat actual carbohydrates.
So they may be inadvertently causing the exact metabolic dysfunction they are trying to avoid.
Exactly. We also have to mention unnecessary antibiotics, which act like a nuclear bomb on the factory floor. A single heavy course can severely deplete microbial diversity for months or even years. And heavy chronic alcohol consumption directly breaks down the tight junctions we discussed earlier, physically causing the gut permeability that drives systemic inflammation.
But let's look at the lifestyle factors that actually heal the terrain, because it's not just what you ingest. Sleep is a massive physiological factor here, isn't it?
Sleep is foundational because your gut bacteria actually operate on their own circadian rhythms.
Wait, bacteria need to sleep.
In a way, yes. Erratic, disrupted sleep alters their feeding and activity cycles. Just a few consecutive nights of bad sleep measurably changes the populations of bacteria that regulate your appetite hormones. Conversely, getting 7 to 8 hours of consistent, deep sleep provides the biological downtime required to stabilize your microbial ecosystem.
And stress. I always assumed stress eating was purely emotional. Like, I had a bad day, so I want comfort food. But the gut-brain axis goes both ways, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, is a massive disruptor. When you are chronically stressed, your brain essentially tells your body it is in constant danger.
The fight or flight response.
Right. It shifts blood flow away from the digestive tract and toward the muscles. This slows down gut motility, meaning food sits too long, allowing opportunistic bad bacteria to ferment it excessively and spike inflammation. Stress is arguably one of the most underappreciated factors in microbiome disruption.
I think the most mind-blowing fact from the lifestyle research came from the University of Illinois. They looked at physical movement, and the results were just incredible.
Oh, the exercise intervention study. It perfectly isolates the impact of movement.
Yeah, so they took a group of people and had them start a regular exercise routine, but strictly controlled their diets so nothing changed on the plate. And they found that exercise alone, without a single dietary modification, actually increased the populations of butyrate-producing bacteria in the gut.
Which is huge, because butyrate is a critical short-chain fatty acid. When beneficial bacteria produce butyrate, it rapidly reduces systemic inflammation, actively provides energy to the cells lining the gut to keep the barrier strong, and actually influences the biochemical pathways that inhibit fat storage.
So what does this all mean? It means that when you go for a 20-minute walk after dinner, or when you prioritize getting a good night's sleep instead of doom scrolling, you aren't just following generic, soft wellness advice. You are mechanically changing the environment of your gut. You are literally feeding, protecting, and managing your internal bacterial workforce.
If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, weight management is fundamentally an ecosystem management job.
It's treating your gut like a complex, living garden rather than a cold mathematical calorie calculator.
Exactly. Calories in, calories out is an incomplete equation because it willfully ignores the biological mechanics of digestion, hormonal signaling, and cellular inflammation. To fix a broken metabolism, you must focus on bacterial diversity. You need to add prebiotic fiber, introduce fermented foods, ruthlessly protect your sleep, and manage your chronic stress to keep cortisol from wrecking the terrain.
So if you are listening to this and you've been struggling for years, beating yourself up over a diet that just isn't working, I hope you take away that it is likely not a failure of your willpower at all. It might simply be a profound misalignment of your 38 trillion passengers. The era of the one-size-fits-all crash diet is completely over. Personalized nutrition based on your highly unique microbial fingerprint is the future of human health.
It requires a massive paradigm shift in how we view our bodies. We're not just isolated individuals. We are hosts to a vast, highly intelligent biological ecosystem.
Which leaves us with a final, highly provocative thought to ponder. If obesity and weight management are largely driven by the physical disruption of a microscopic ecosystem dictated by the bacteria we acquired at birth, the antibiotics we had to take as kids, and the emulsifiers hidden in our food, how does that completely change the intense social stigma and moral judgment society places on body weight? And looking forward, could the future of weight loss entirely bypass restrictive diets and invasive gastric surgeries? Are we moving toward a world where curing a broken metabolism is as simple as taking a highly personalized, targeted bacterial transplant pill to completely rewire the factory floor?
It forces us to completely rethink what it actually means to be in control of our own biology.
Next time you get that intense late-night craving for sugar, ask yourself, are you actually the one who's hungry? Or are you just being mind controlled by a trillion tiny microbes demanding to be fed?